Making Artios work with and for your homeschool. Welcome. My name is Lori Lane, and I'm the founder and executive director of Artios Academies. And in this podcast, I'm going to be sharing with you some answers to some very common questions that we often get from parents involved in Artios Academies on how to make Artios work with and for their own homeschooling. Families are often curious about how to correlate and integrate their own homeschool studies at home with what's going on at Artios. What I'm going to be talking to you about today explains how many of us have achieved this over the years. There are three basic rules that we follow. 1, we always correlate the history being studied at home with the history at the Artios Academy of Arts and History. 2, we tie all other subjects in with Artios as much as possible. And 3, we stay flexible, knowing that we can't do this perfectly every week. One of the most important tools to you making the most out of Artios Academies is the integration chart that shows what's being taught at Artios each and every week in the Academy of Arts and History. If you haven't received that, make sure that you contact your local director so that you have that in your hands. That will make the information that I'm going to share with you in the remainder of this podcast that much easier to implement at home. I also wanted to mention that much of what I'm going to talk about through this podcast is done already for you through the Artios Preparatory Academy. For those of you who wish to become involved in that Preparatory Academy, what I'm talking about here in this podcast is already done for you and the structure is provided. But I'm going to be talking even more today for those of you who are doing this at home or who are just getting started with Artios or new to the Preparatory Academy. This will give you a good idea of where we are headed. Let's talk first about history, geography, government, and economics. Students at the Artios Academy of Arts and History are immersed in the history of the time period. In history class, they study major events, people, and the flow of history. And rather than learning isolated facts, they're being taught history within the context of the larger picture of God's hand in history, a context that will provide them with mental hooks upon which to hang specific facts. Geography, government, and economics are integral parts of the history classes. Economics and geography throughout history have driven much of the history tapestry. The various forms of government that dominated in each age are examined to some extent, particularly in our older classes at the Artios Academy of Arts and History. So it's an easy step to follow up and build on these same concepts at home. How? Have your student make maps and do reports on cities, countries, and empires from the period. Have them compare and contrast the various forms of government that dominated. Discuss with them the effects of shifting economic conditions and changing values or religions in the world at that time. Read historical novels as a fun way to get a flavor of the times. Check out videos to help them visualize the clothing, weaponry, housing of that period. Older students might be encouraged to read from Streams of Civilization or some of the Genevieve Foster books like August Caesar's World or George Washington's World or Abraham Lincoln's World. Have them read the corresponding chapters that will build on what they've learned at Artios Academy of Arts and History that week. Have them do some projects or maybe even take some of the tests that are provided. Go on field trips that are related to the time period being studied. Each year at Artios Academies, we provide a suggested reading list that goes along with that integration chart that I mentioned earlier. The following are also great resources for finding time period related historical novels, biographies, videos, and DVDs. Honey for a Child's Heart, Honey for a Teenager's Heart, Movies as Literature, Learning with the Movies, Let the Author Speak, and some of the Tapestry of Grace reading lists. It's important also to point out here that what I'm talking about is a very eclectic approach to homeschooling, one that is easily adapted to each one of your individual children and some of their interests and their desire-driven learning. It's important to note that Artios Home Companion Series provides a structure for you to do this at home so that a lot of the gathering and gleaning of materials has already been done. This will save you a lot of time and effort. It's used in our Artios Preparatory Academy, but it is also able to be used as a standalone curriculum at home. You could call it a curriculum with an eclectic approach. Let's move on to drama and literature. Each year, those of us who have learned to integrate Artios within our own home school have studied literature that is drawn from the time period. In the drama classes, students are delving into various pieces of literature from the time period in their pursuit of learning the skills within drama. We, in turn, build on that at home and add other works that I might choose. They read and write book reports or do biographical sketches of the authors or the writers, and for persuasive writing, they do reviews. My high schoolers may use study guides along with the selected works that I've chosen, and then we will discuss the reading. It's wonderful that our students are studying literature within the time period, or the context of the period in which it was written. Every period is rich with classic literature, much of which has been edited for even young children in abridged versions. A good example of this is William Shakespeare. Older students can read the original works, but there are also children's versions available as well. Charles and Mary Lamb's Tales from Shakespeare provide a retelling of 20 of Shakespeare's works in story form that can be read to young children. Upper elementary and middle school children can read along as well. Our writing and language arts are driven also by what we're studying at Artios. We do a separate grammar or spelling curriculum, but only when it is beneficial to the student at their learning and maturity level. This is also true in our Artios Home Companion Series and true within the Artios Preparatory Program. We then apply what we're learning in grammar and spelling to the writing that is within the context of their history, their literature, or their science studies. Library research and vocabulary develop naturally as they read, research, and write. For math, obviously, we use a separate math curriculum, but math can often come alive to that struggling student as we study the mathematicians of that time period. Pythagoras, Archimedes, or using the Pythagorean theorem to construct a pyramid. We use the book Mathematicians Are People Too for quick mini biographies of many great mathematicians. For art. As you know, students will do art projects and study artists from the period in their classes at Artios Academies. But to further your students' art education at home, visit the museum. For the medieval Renaissance period, consider a field trip to look at art from that time period. Libraries have many good biographies and biographical videos on famous artists as well. For those of you who live in the Southeast, Bob Jones University has the most complete collection of religious art from the medieval and Renaissance time period in the world, and it contains many works that will be of great interest and for great discussion on worldview with your students. For music, students will gain much from listening to the music of the time period, not only during their Artios classes, but also at home. Check out some CDs for music of the time period and have those playing while your students are studying at home. Attend concerts and learn about the composers and trends of the time period at home. For Bible, this is a great opportunity to show your students what God says about creativity in the arts. Instead of Bible being an add-on or an afterthought, it should be the beginning and ending place for all of our homeschool subjects. We do this at Artios Academies, we do this within the preparatory program, and we do it within the Artios Home Companion Series through our Leading Ideas principle. Some resources that I would recommend. Obviously, the local libraries are a rich resource. Take advantage of them and save money. Many of the homeschool catalogs have resources you can purchase to correlate with each time period. We will provide a history syllabus, as I mentioned, the integration chart, to help serve as a guide. as well as a reading list. In my next podcast, I'll be talking about how to use Artios for high school credits. I hope this has been of great help to you, and if you have any questions, please feel free to contact your local director or contact me at llane@artiosacademies.com.